back here. How's the commercial break? And we're going to jump back into the presentation. We are also going to have all morning tomorrow on the same presentation. So you don't need to rush. It's important that we understand what we're doing. And we are not going to finish in a half hour. We have left this morning, so don't panic when we don't, because the plan is to not. We're just going to have lots of exciting teasers, and everyone's available to sort of work through stuff with everyone else. So with that, going back to you.
So again, I am Patrick Tickerton. I am with the Joint Fiscal Office, and we are going to be returning to the slides that we started. We made it as far as slide 12. And I guess I will start with a question of whether you would like to go back and look at any of the corporate income slides again, or if we should continue with pass-through income and sort of set the stage for the next part of the discussion that we'll have tomorrow, which is around personal income.
I think it would be good to go to the next, to keep on going, and then tomorrow we can go back to corporate if we need to.
Okay, so the sort of banner here is that, we're talking about businesses having an indirect benefit where their employees don't need to miss work for unexpected childcare issues. Well, we've sort of applied a tax rate to some businesses, but there are many businesses that do not pay corporate income taxes. They pay via another route. And I'll say I'm sorry if some of this next part will be a little repetitive. I know Ted has been in here to talk to you guys a couple of times on this topic, but I think it's important to highlight that there is a big slice of the business community that is paying their taxes differently, and that will sort of set us up for like I said, the discussion tomorrow. So these businesses often have employees, they benefit from the childcare, and so really the best way under the existing structure that we can sort of make sure that pass-through income or businesses that are set up as sole proprietors, S corps, partnerships, we attach a tax rate to their personal income taxes. So, like I said, there's these three sort of buckets here, the types of businesses these companies are receiving their income. It's flowing through into the owner's business, personal income taxes. I think some of this is just review for you all, but are there any questions on these three types? Okay. So again, this is just showing the flow of, you have a sole proprietor, their business makes $100,000 in profit, that owner receives that profit, and then they claim that $100,000 in profit when they go to file their personal income taxes.
And the majority of the business folks who testified yesterday are directors of various kinds of pass-through entities.
Interesting. So I guess when you're thinking about all these, you can tie it neatly back into the testimony you received from them yesterday. Another type here, S Corp, a little more complicated than a sole proprietor, but again, whatever the share of ownership that an individual has, they'll be receiving that profit to them, and then they have to, again, claim that on their personal income tax return when they file. So there are a lot of pass-through businesses in Vermont. Here you can see a slide that Ted pulled together over time showing just the number of C corporations, which we talked about previously, compared to just the number of pass-through entities. And you can see that there are more businesses that are set up as pass-through businesses than there are C corps. So really, any adjustment to the personal income tax is really going to be affecting these types of businesses. Like, it's going to affect a greater portion of the number of businesses, I guess. That was kind of a mouthful, but in the interest of making, sorry.
And in the interest of time, I'll be brief. We also have learned that those S Corp businesses, I think that's what they're called, the blue line here, these are the majority of Vermont businesses, and they're small some family-owned or, you know, three partners who banded together to do something. But anyway, the point I want to make is these are the majority of Vermont businesses, our downtowns, you know, where most people work. So I just wanted to make that point. Yeah.
I was also just curious if you have a read on why one has increased and one has decreased. And if not, that's fine.
Well, I mean, there's certain, so, you know, with C corps, or sorry, S corps, that's a situation where you can only have up to 100 shareholders to be structured that way. C corps are, you know, often have more shareholders than that. Sometimes they can be publicly traded. So, you know, I think it's potentially the way that you're structured, what type of corporation you are, could be tied to sort of how your business is also structured in the ownership structure. So like partnership would be something you probably, you know, downtown here, there's probably a small lawyer firm where they've got 3 lawyers and they're all third-part owners, right? Doesn't really make sense for them to be structured like a C corp, right? So that would be sort of my read, you know, especially in a state where a lot of our businesses here are small businesses.
Or, you know, yesterday we heard from some huge businesses by Vermont standards, certainly small national standards, who were family-owned businesses. So, and haven't sold. And I do remember in the presentation, Ted, when we were talking through the pass-throughs, there was sort of there was an inflection point where we saw the pass-throughs going up and the other one.
Especially as it pertains to the C corp, those registered C corps, they're not headquartered here, right? I mean, those are 2 different words.
That is my understanding, yeah.
Okay, so if they do business in Vermont, they have to register in Vermont, but they're headquartered probably.
So let me just take back what I just said and amend that by saying, let me double check that for you.
All right. This seems like a lot of C corps for Vermont.
Okay. We are good. So in 2019, there's about 58,000 Vermont resident returns that reported about $895 million in sole proprietorship income. So that's, you know, it's somewhat substantial amount of money that is being claimed by this particular type of business structure. So that represented about 4% of total Vermont AGI on income tax forms that year. Likewise, there were about 20,000 resident returns that reported $1 billion in S corp or partnership income, and that represented about 4.6% of total Vermont AGI across the state claimed on personal income tax forms. So that's, you know, put together, that's about $1.9 billion in business income that's being that's flowing through the personal income tax structure. And, you know, JFO wrote an issue brief that estimated that for fiscal year 2020, pass-through returns generated at least $110 million in personal income tax revenue. So that overall, that represents about 12% of income tax revenues, and estimated about 6.7% of available general fund revenues in that fiscal year. And so when I say that, what I mean is all the money that's going into the general fund, just this type of business income that was being taxed represented about 6.7% of all the money that was going in the pot. And sitting here now, I'm realizing it might have been kind of interesting for you to see what the total pot was, but I can get that to you if anyone's interesting.
There's something odd. The total of pass-throughs is 110 million. But corporations and partnership income is $1 billion.
So I know that I believe the data for this came initially to Graham and has since been updated by Ted with the assistance of the tax department. So
All pass-throughs include sole, S, partnerships, LLPs, LLCs. And I'm surprised the number is so small. 110 million.
That's just the tax.
that's just the tax revenue. Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. Just the tax revenue. Got it.
If you're doing work on this, I would love to see it in a table or a pie chart.
Okay. So I'm not passing the buck here, but I will say I did steal a few slides from Ted. But yes, I know charts and tables are the
Just
Best
to
practice.
understand the proportionality. Yeah.
well, maybe when I get you back the total general fund for fiscal year 2020, I can put that as a pie chart. Okay, so basically, big picture of this slide, there's a significant amount of business income that is pass-through income that is goes through the personal income tax structure. So most pass-throughs are small and pay modest amounts of tax on their profits, sometimes if any. Most pass-throughs, that's a repetition, that point there. Yeah, so roughly a third of pass-throughs report no taxable income. So there are a lot of small ones. A lot of them don't have taxable income. You know, they just don't. Maybe they have a loss in a year or just don't make enough to sort of hit that. The tax base is really driven by a very small number of very large and or profitable pass-throughs. I don't have all of the chart or tables that Ted had provided, but what I will sort of illustrate verbally is when you looked at the income across the sort of similar AGI, or not AGI, remember when we looked at the corporate income tax table and we had it bracketed by net income, and sort of you saw as if you went up the scale, the number of firms got smaller, but the amount of tax that they were contributing got a lot bigger, right? So this is sort of a similar situation where the majority of pass-through taxes that are being paid tend to skew towards a smaller set of higher earning businesses. So the number of pass-through businesses and the amount of income generated by those businesses has increased sharply in the last 30 years. Pass-through income returns, with the exception of the most profitable pass-throughs, benefit from the discrepancy between personal income tax rates and corporate income tax rates. So again, that might get back to that question that was asked earlier about why someone might choose to set up their business in a certain way. I won't go into too much detail on that because I know you've had quite a bit of testimony from Ted on this subject. And so why are we talking about this type of business? Well, ideally here we are asking the business community to chip in. Best way of sort of adjusting the tax that they pay on their income is not through corporate income taxes, which someone might think at first, but really to start looking at personal income taxes and how they actually realize that income and file based on what they, based on the income that they get. So that sort of sets us up to what will be the next section, which is then talking about sort of the second big piece of this package, which is sort of doing a flat 0.5% increase to all the tax rates. So that's each marginal rate being increased by 0.5%. And when we go through that, we'll look at how that shakes out up and down the income spectrum. We'll look at how that compares to other states. And yeah, we'll see how much that you could raise from that. And I'm sorry, it's a kind of a, I'm kind of burying the lead a little bit, but the actual money amounts, everything put together, is going to be all the way at the end of the presentation. But it is available online, so if you wanted to skip ahead, you could go check that out. And then tomorrow, quickly, the other thing that we'll touch on is the EITC part of this proposal or package. And again, we'll walk through how each of these points tie back to those four sort of guiding principles that we started out with. So.
Yeah.
If I just read ahead mentally,
Let's not read ahead now.
okay.
Is there anyone who is still reading backwards mentally in this question about presentation?
I'd be happy to answer or attempt to answer any questions people still have on the corporate income tax side.
And we are gonna have Abby come in for a quick refresher on corporate, and then gonna be available other times for other people who wanna dive deeper and more in on the committee lesson. Okay. No other, okay. We'll see everyone after the floor.
Wait, that was it?
Well, I think before we launch into personal income taxes, which will be that'll be a lengthy section. There's actually more slides there than there were for corporate.
Okay.
So I think we don't,
We only have 10 minutes.
yeah.
Got it.
So, because that's how many more minutes we have on our agenda, it's 10 more minutes, it's about 11:30 today. And so we're gonna see from after the floor, we're gonna have super fun diving back into more charter changes. One of them's a local option tax, but one of them's a new thing, so.
Exciting.